Having a quorum present, we'll call to order the October 23rd Historic Landmarks Commission meeting. First item on the agenda is public comment. Any member of the public may address the Historic Landmarks Commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject that is not on today's agenda that is within our jurisdiction. Seeing no public, I'll close the public comment and go to approval of the minutes of the Historic Landmarks Commission meeting of October 9th, 2013. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Have a second.
Second.
A motion by, hold on please, have a motion by Sharp, a second by Winnick. Under discussion, any additions, corrections, or clarifications? Ms. Arias.
Okay, on page number 2, item number 2, I requested future discussion item regarding the Italian stone pine landmark trees located in front of the East Donovan tree that do not look healthy. I reverse it to change they are dead. And we asked, I believe we asked that Parks and Rec, the city arborist come and discuss this because there was concern that it could be an infection which could be moving down the tree, the line of trees. This should indicate that we asked the city arborist to come, and there is some need to be done if this is indeed an infection that is spreading down the line of trees. So I would like to have it show that we asked the city arborist to attend our meeting and discuss this problem.
Okay, so is it fair to say then Commissioner Arias requested a future discussion item with the city arborist in respect to the 2 Italian stone pine landmark trees in front of a church on East Anamu Street that are dead?
That'd be the Methodist Church.
Methodist Church?
Methodist Church, yes.
First Methodist.
Of the Methodist Church.
Okay, then I have another item on page 3. Under Mr. Lamone's paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4 down, there is a sentence there that makes no sense.
Which sentence?
For municipal code requirements, condition approval are not necessary and are duplicated, so they will generally not be applied in the future.
Duplicative is not the right use of that word.
No, and that they will not be applied in the future. What's the point of having them if they're not? So I think that paragraph should be revised to indicate what Mr. Lamone did indicate. And also, under the last thing where the commission made the following comments, item number 4, there are concerns in limiting conditions because of the need to protect neighbors during construction, etc. And that there should be a statement saying that the conditions are a requirement to the approval of the project. In other words, without the conditions, the project might not receive approval. We talked about it being essentially a contract between at the meeting, and that should be indicated here.
May I comment on that?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr.
I
Lamone.
think Ms. Arias is correct. My statement was actually, I thought that the conditions of approval were typically reminders. And the reason I said that, if I could expand a little bit more, because I think there was some concern about how that came out, was for the most part, the Planning Commission is trying to convey back to the review boards what conditions are important that you should focus your attention on. That's why they're actually broken up in sections by saying this is what the Historic Landmarks Commission should focus on, this is what Public Works needs to have happen before certificate of occupancy is made on the building or prior to submittal of the application, whatever stage that condition is. And yes, it is a contract to some degree, but what I was concerned about is that because these projects were not getting a preliminary review by these departments, the concern that we were missing conditions that they may want to impose. And therefore, it's implied that these are the only conditions of approval, when in fact, what I was stating is the applicant developer is required to comply with all municipal code requirements, and some of them are redundant in the sense that we're restating the requirement in the municipal code to do this. And what happened on one project was this concern about a bus stop not being addressed. Because we didn't have that conversation, the developer might be under the impression that they don't have to place a bus stop because it wasn't outlined as a condition. So I think it's going to speak to the issue of this interdepartment process of getting a review for these projects. And I think that'll be the part 2 discussion on the AUD, where you'll get your say on the proposed review process for these projects.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Rios.
to go back then to the paragraph where you did the discussion, you said that standard language for conditions have been developed. I
Yes.
believe they are being developed. Or if they have been developed, then we should receive copies of them.
What I was trying to infer to you is that the city has a template of standard conditions that they apply, that they've been vetted with our city attorney. So we have a menu, per se, to select conditions that are already set language. And in your I think, question was, could we tweak the conditions or modify them? And I was just pointing out that it's difficult to do that when we already have them vetted. We don't want to create conditions here at our table
Right.
that the city attorney is not involved with, but we certainly can refer any concern and address that at a future date. But I didn't want to wordsmith conditions here.
Then would it be helpful for us to have copies of those conditions? That's what I'm saying. If they're already in existence,
Right.
then it would be helpful if we had copies of those conditions, not because we're operating without any knowledge of what those conditions are. And
The full template?
Full template.
Okay,
if
well,
necessary.
we will discuss that in the first presentation today. at
Otherwise, we are operating in a vacuum, and we do not know what the template is and what the conditions are, and then we get criticized for doing something we shouldn't be doing. So we need to know that, we need to have a basic foundation.
We will discuss that. I think that's a point of discussion.
Okay, so I'm going to try and quickly read that paragraph as it's been altered or changed. Could you make it bigger again?
So this is what you received. This is the version that the final
In our
version that you
package,
received.
Okay. And you're revising. I want to read the proposed revisions so that we are all clear. Is that?
So this is what I had. This is what I had originally as a paragraph, and Ms. Arias actually was mentioning this right now during the conversation. Exactly what she said is what was originally in the paragraph.
Okay. So the proposed paragraph then would read, Mr. Limon discussed conditions of approval for projects. Standard language for conditions have been developed to comply with legal requirements. For municipal code requirements, conditions of approval are not necessary and are redundant, not duplicative. Duplicative is the wrong word.
So if you see the paragraph below that, the highlighted in yellow, it says he clarified that although there are specific conditions that can be crafted for a particular project by boards and commissions, conditions of approval can include municipal code requirements that the applicant must comply with, whether they are made part of the written conditions of approval or not. Including them in the written conditions have simply served as a reminder for the developer. There is no need to readdress them during the development and design review hearings. Therefore, future development projects to be reviewed by the HLC will not include municipal code requirements in the draft conditions of approval.
Well, I would recommend just deleting all of it. Actually, I didn't have a chance to review this. I think it's just too much information. I would much rather say one clear statement that we will carefully review conditions of approval for projects if they're applicable. That's my point.
It sounds broad enough that it would cover everything, but does it satisfy Commissioner
That satisfies
Diaz's?
me, that we have the option
Yes.
of doing, and that the book is open.
Yes.
Okay.
May I have the red wording, please, for the...
Mr. Limon?
Right, just delete after everything there below.
All the way down to incentive program.
Well, you can keep the last sentence.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
And then indicate that conditions of approval will be applied as applicable on projects. That's really what my statement was.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
That we're going to look at them carefully.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying it. I was a little concerned.
good. All right, any other corrections or clarifications on the minutes? Anyone? No? Then all in favor of the minutes as amended? Aye. Opposed?
Abstain.
I abstain. Sudin abstains.
Murray abstain.
Murray abstains. Motion carries. Sudin is abstaining because he wasn't present. Next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Ms. Gantz.
Mr. Chair, item A was final approval with conditions. Item A at 731 East Dale Lake Art Plaza was final approval with conditions. Item B, 1002 Anacapa Street was final approval as noted. Item C, 514 State Street was final approval of door changes and continued 2 weeks for other unapproved work. Item D, 825 Santa Barbara Street was final approval as submitted of a review after final. Item E at 11 West Victoria Street was project design approval and final approval as noted. Item F at 1500 State Street was continued 2 weeks. Those were reviewed by Commissioner Sharp except for item F, which was reviewed by Chair Suding.
Okay, do I have a motion to ratify the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
I have a motion by Winnick, second by Murray. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Mr. Chair, I abstain on item F for perceived potential conflict of interest.
Okay. Lavoy is abstaining on consent item F, 1500 State Street, excuse me. Next item on the agenda is announcements or request by applicants is for continuances, withdrawals, future agenda items, any appeals, anything that we need to be aware of on City Council or the Planning Commission. Ms. Gantz.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners Boucher, Drury, and Schallenberger will be absent from today's meeting, and a reminder that the 1330 Chapala Street project for the Arlington Village project is being appealed at City Council meeting next Tuesday, October 29th.
Okay. And did, I believe at the last meeting, you...
Two people.
Two people were
Correct.
selected to...
Commissioners Lavoy and Orias
Okay.
will attend.
Very good.
No, I'm sorry. I believe,
I thought it was Schallenberg.
I thought it was Schallenberg.
No, he deferred to you.
did? Oh, I take
I'm
it back.
sorry, what? I couldn't,
He
She
deferred
said
to
he
you.
deferred.
I didn't hear that.
He deferred to you because you both had, what did the minutes say?
I voted for the project, but I thought the commission deferred to him over me as being an architect.
Commissioners Lavoy and Arias agreed to represent the commission at the city council hearing that is scheduled to occur Tuesday, October
Thank you.
29th.
Thank you for clarifying it.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Sharp, Commissioner Sharp.
this is to remind HLC members and our alumni that the annual holiday party will be December 15th at my house at 5:30 in conjunction with members of the Santa Barbara Conservancy.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so
Nice.
save the date.
Thanks for the invite.
Any other announcements?
I have
Mr. Winnick.
an announcement, Mr. Chair. I this week attended, or last week, Thursday, I'm on, supposedly.
It doesn't say mute on the LED.
Does not
does
say
it?
mute.
Okay, just speak a
We
little bit
got the
louder.
right colors. Can you hear me? Is it showing up over there, Gabrielle? No? Well. Here, I'll shut it off and turn it back on. Now you can hear me. Okay, great.
Can you hear me now?
It wasn't on mute. All right, it's working? Great. Maybe it's just too low. Here, put it up higher. Anyway, so I attended the Arts Commission and Visual Arts in Public Places meeting on Thursday. And there is a project that's of interest that's going to be coming up in front of HLC, so I'll just mention it so that everybody knows.
Please do.
They haven't submitted it yet. So the project is a temporary mural that will be installed on the side of the Hotel Indigo, and it is being sponsored by MCA, which used to be CAF, it's the Museum of Contemporary Arts, and the mural will be by an artist. His name is Rafael Vargas Suarez, and he was born in Mexico City and is a resident of Brooklyn, New York. And he's done this in the past, in fact, even on historic locations where they're done very successfully. It's kind of in sort of a two-color murals in the past where they were almost like black and white. But anyway, it would be temporary, and it's on the side of the building. It is in El Pueblo Viejo, so it'll come in front of us. In my opinion, and obviously other commissioners get to see it too, it looked like something we would be able to support, especially since it's temporary for a year, and it's on the site that will be the future Children's Museum. So that's partially why it would be
Okay, so it's on the
railroad
north
side, on the
of it,
north side
not
of the building.
parking lots.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, it sounds like an exciting project, so hopefully they'll be submitting to HLC soon, and it'll come up on our agenda.
Thank you for attending that. Any other announcements? That was actually a subcommittee report, but that's okay.
Sorry, jumped the gun.
I have a couple of, that is the subcommittee. I have a couple of announcements. Earlier this month, I met with Cameron Benson from the Creeks Department at his request to look at potential locations for installation of permeable pavers as sort of a demonstration, a upfront and easy way for the public to look at what permeable pavers are. We talked about several projects, one being at the Italian Stone Pines on East Anapamu. There are some hurdles that would have to be jumped in order to do that, and there's a time limit on the grant that they have to do the installation of the permeable pavers. With respect to the Stone Pines, we have to work really with Public Works to get them to be comfortable with the use of the permeable pavers. The other location we discussed in to quite some length is Arlington Avenue, putting permeable pavers in the street as well as the sidewalk. And I went through all of the concerns that I thought HLC would have with those permeable pavers. Color, planting between the sidewalk and the curb, all of that stuff. And it will be a project that I believe he was going to be bringing to HLC in the very near future. We also later talked about different paseos, like the paseo that is between the library, the museum, and the parking structure. And I had a little bit of difficulty with that because it's hard to start and stop that type of paving logically, and that is such a intertwined paseo through there that it's just it didn't seem like the optimal location. Which segues into my next meeting that I had yesterday with Mr. Bob Cunningham, Mr. Victor Garza, Mr. Dion Tate, and Miss Terry Green. Regarding the paseo that is adjacent to parking lot 3, and that's the paseo that comes off of Figueroa Street and leads into the parking lot next to Walter Claudio and behind Business First Bank. They wanted to get a sense of what HLC would be looking for on that, so I advised them keep it simple. We want landscape, things like that. So they'll be bringing that project before us in the future. Not necessarily the near future, but they will be bringing it to us. That's all I have. Any subcommittee reports?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Murray.
Yeah, we had the designation subcommittee meeting this morning with Nicole Hernandez, and quickly was a discussion of structures of marriage listing for 2014, and also just a discussion on a different potential historic districts that are going to be coming up. She's got 2 interns who are working hard to help compile the list and really beefing up all the surveys and making sure they are all in order and in line. Also, discussion of landmark designations for 2014. We'll have a list. We're going to try to have at least 4 or 6 properties.
Resolutions.
Yeah, resolutions. Anyway, there's a lot on Nicole's plate, and we are moving fast and furious forward.
She can handle it. Any other subcommittee reports? Okay, then we'll go to the first item on the agenda. We are 6 minutes behind. It's a miscellaneous action item. Item number 1 is 2112 Santa Barbara Street. The commission is requested to adopt a resolution of intention to hold a public hearing at 1:45 p.m. on November 6, 2013 to consider recommending to City Council that the entire parcel at 2112 Santa Barbara Street be designated a city landmark. Ms. Hernandez, did you want to start off?
Sure. The property at 2112 Santa Barbara Street is known as the Hodges House. It was constructed in 1921, designed by the noted architectural firm of Sewell Murphy and Hastings in the Italian Mediterranean style. The landscape was designed by the noted local landscape architect Ralph Talent Stevens. So the entire parcel is significant both historically and architecturally for its influence on the heritage of Santa Barbara. The property owner has agreed to city landmark designation, and the historic structure report did find that the property does meet the Santa Barbara Master Environmental Assessment criteria for city landmark designation. The Historic Landmark Commission has reviewed proposed restoration and rehabilitation for the property to ensure that it will be completed according to the Secretary of Interior standards for historic properties. And therefore, staff does recommend that you hold a public hearing to recommend city landmark designation to City Council.
Okay. Do you have anything you need to say? Okay. I'll open public comment. Mr. Kellum DeForest. Mr. DeForest.
I just would like to know if there were some beautiful photographs in the material that came out of the property. I'd just like to know if this becomes a landmark, is the swimming pool still proposed?
You don't need to answer that. Ms. Hernandez?
We resolved at the last meeting that the swimming pool meets the Secretary of Interior standards and does not impact its qualifications to be a city landmark.
The boundaries.
Oh, actually, we were doing the entire parcel around because the landscaping is significant because it's a Ralph Talent Stevens intact.
So it's not just 5 feet from the structure, it's the...
We should carefully look at our report written by Blair on the surrender. We want the entire property.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it says proposed boundary of the city landmark. This is the entire parcel of the property.
Okay, good. Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner LaVoy.
As a comment to that, since it's a new addition, it would be identified as non-contributing and therefore not be included as part of what makes it a landmark.
Not a,
Am I correct?
yeah, the swimming pool.
The swimming pool specifically is non-contributing
Yeah,
because it's not historic.
it's not
Yeah.
historic, it's new.
So that would go in like the 4th paragraph or so.
It would go, yeah, I could put it into where it
That's
says
where it's talking about.
designation of the entire parcel of the
Yeah,
property.
yeah. Right.
Excluding,
Excluding the new swimming pool.
Excluding
Yeah.
the swimming pool
the proposed
addition
new
as
swimming.
non-contributing addition in 2014 or whatever.
Right, because at the last meeting, we discussed that it was accepted as part of the
Yeah.
report because it meets the axial and design.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Any other discussion from the commission? Mr. Lamone?
Yes, I just wanted to be, full disclosure here, that the applicant has decided to do the designation as part of the Mills Act contract,
Right.
which we will subsequently discuss. So it is a condition that they are hoping council will agree to, which is grant them the Mills Act contract,
Right.
and they will agree to the designation. So it is contingent on that.
Okay.
I just wanted to point that out.
Okay.
That's a really good point.
Commissioner Murray?
Well, I guess when we go to that one, we'll discuss it. Yeah, okay.
So does somebody want to make a motion for
I'll
the
make that
resolution of
motion,
intention?
Mr. Chair.
I'll second it.
We have a motion by Lavoy, second by Arias. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries.
I would like to make one comment and say thank you.
Very good, yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a miscellaneous action item for 2112 Santa Barbara Street. This requires a recommendation to City Council for approval of an exception to exceed contract limits. What is that about?
That's what I'm about to explain.
Okay. Please do.
Okay.
You're getting a little help is what it means.
When we changed our ordinance to include this incentive to allow Mills Act contracts, it was essentially approved by City Council as a pilot program. And the reason we indicated it was a pilot program because we were unsure at the time how popular this incentive would be. And based on this concern of the loss of revenue, Council supported adoption of this program with set limits. And the set limits that we instituted were 8 contracts, up to 8 contracts per year, and a property valuation of $1.5 million assessed value. The purpose was,
Sorry,
again...
was that the ceiling, the max?
The max.
Or the minimum?
The max.
Okay, the max. Okay.
So since 2007, I think is when we adopted the ordinance amendment, we have been relaying to prospective property owners these limits with respect to property value. And so we've actually turned some folks away that were interested. These property owners probably might have inquired also, or somebody who wanted to buy this property. Since that time, we've discovered, working with Ms. Lomhall, that there is an allowed exception in our ordinance that allows City Council to grant an exception to those limits on either the number of contracts or the assessed value portion. And so what we'd like to do is move forward with possibly your recommendation to council that allows for an exception in this case. We think this is a exemplary restoration project, and we believe that there is a considerable amount of expense that's being made to the structure to bring it back to its original use and appearance. And for that reason, I think there would be some basis for you to grant or recommend granting this exception.
I don't think you're going to hear any resistance from the commission, but I'll open public comment first. Having no public, I'll close public comment, bring it to the commission.
I have a
Anything to
question.
add? Yes,
I have
Commissioner Murray.
I have a question. Bill Lavoy mentioned the swimming pool is not contributing, and so when you get this thing approved, does it include only the landmarked part? In other words, we are not going to see restoration or repair of the swimming pool because that's not landmarked. I'm just asking those questions.
As part of a Mills Act contract, I've included in the memorandum that was sent to you an outline of the type of expenses and costs associated with the rehabilitation repair plan. It's a guide. It serves us to denote the expectation that there will be some work to be done on the property. And what's interesting about this proposal is we've decided to front load a major expense here. So we know we have a project. We have a project approved by the Historic Landmarks Commission. We have plans approved that incorporates all these initial improvements. And it's not your typical extended plan where they want to break up necessarily. I believe that's the proposal, not to necessarily do it for 10 years. You don't want a construction project for 10 years. So most of the outlining years are dealing with some annual maintenance costs. And that is also an estimate. What we will do is evaluate that over time to see if, in fact, there is a need for maintenance and if the property is being maintained to the level that a landmark should be. And given the considerable expense that are being outlined in the first 5 years, I think it more than enough allows the tax abatement to be regained in investment into the home.
Yeah.
So although there's some work to be done, they could do a remodel for the swimming pool. We wouldn't necessarily consider that necessarily the maintenance for the
Right.
historic part of the property.
All right, thank
Any
you.
other questions or comments?
Well, I'm confused, which is unusual, when you give me a list of numbers. So the valuation of the property is based on after the improvements, and then they get the tax break?
No. No,
So
Mr.
they get the tax break on its current value?
Right, and there's a
And
formula.
then, so they will, their taxes will come down, and then they'll go back up again because of,
There's improvements.
improvements.
Right.
Improvements, yeah.
really?
There's an
Should we
incentive.
wait a week, a year?
There's an incentive, and I think there's a formula that calculates it on a set basis. And I have not seen too many Mills Act contracts which have a lot of improvements. The two that we've approved have been more of a maintenance repair project. So
Stump a
these
house, yeah.
are a little bit more aggressive because they involve some additions or major improvements to the home. So we will be interested in seeing how the tax assessor assesses the property and determines the amount of savings. I know we can give them, the property owner, an estimate, but ultimately it's the tax assessor how they do this before and after assessment.
So basically, it's a tax break on the house as it sits right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think eventually it will be a reduction.
Okay,
That's-
thank you.
That is kind of convoluted and confusing, but I think it's a good incentive.
It is.
You know, and just for members of the public and people that are watching on TV, Mills Act is an act that gives tax incentives to historic landmarks. Just to simplify what the Mills Act is. Okay, so somebody want to make a motion?
Make the motion in favor of,
Seconded.
Okay, we have a motion by Winnick, second by Arias, all in favor?
Aye?
Under discussion.
Just to make sure that the motion is to recommend to City Council to grant an exception to approve this.
As a
Mills Act
requirement,
contract.
yes.
So opposed, abstain, the motion carries.
I'd like to make one comment that without these real estate values go up and down and up and down.
Sure.
And to have a fixed figure of a certain number of dollars, a house may qualify one time and not qualify the next time. And this makes it very difficult. I would really like to see those standards be a lot more flexible for preservation because, for instance, I don't think the Stambach house could qualify possibly for the Mills Act, but yet they did have the Mills Act on it. And so I would like to see a lot more flexibility because preservation is very important to this town.
If I could respond to that, one of the questions we may ask City Council when we take this project up, and we're planning on trying to do it before the end of the year, so they can take advantage of the next tax year, is that we will ask council if they're interested in modifying any of these limits.
I would urge you to do that because we have small bungalows that are significant. We have and they wouldn't qualify under this.
Right. The concern that council may have is currently if you don't exceed the maximum property valuation limit, it grants the authority to the commission and the community development director. That's actually the next
Next
one.
one.
The approval basis. You don't have to go to city council. So whether they're willing to trust the commission and community development director to give contract to whoever and how whatever valuation. You know, there could be a mansion that comes in for $7 million valuation, and would there be a considerable tax break here? Yes. And are you open to that? And without council's approval, that would be the additional flexibility concern.
If we're interested in preservation, I think we have to be flexible and assisting.
Okay, next.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is item number 3.
Thank you again.
117 West Mason Street. The commission is requested to recommend that the community development director authorize the execution of a Mills Act contract. Requires a recommendation to the community development director. Mr. Lamone.
Yes, this is the second Mills Act. You've seen contract proposed. You've seen this property. They've actually had a designation occur in September, I believe last month. where they specifically became a structure of merit in order to qualify for the Mills Act contract incentive. So now we are taking this forward also. Again, the difference between this property, this actually qualifies, this had a valuation that qualified, and that they've made considerable improvements. They've spent close to $270,000 to make these rehabilitation plans, and we're going to take this forward also under a Mills Act contract and hopefully allow them to take advantage of the tax abatement.
Okay. I will open public comment. Seeing no public, I'll close public comment, bring it to the commission for any comments or questions.
Yeah. I had,
Anne-Marie?
I can't, because there's a repaint and repair garage. Was that the garage part of the house? And is it contributing, the garage? I can't remember, was it?
I think it
That's
was.
garage? It
Yeah,
was? Okay. All right.
We have a plan here.
If it's part of it, then that's fine. I just can't remember. It's been a while.
Yeah, because we did look at this and the improvements that they were making to it, because it's a duplex, there's residential
Okay.
units on
Oh,
top.
there was an existing.
Yeah, let me see if I can find the elevation. I remember us discussing it,
Okay.
so, I don't see an elevation of the,
The before elevation?
The before.
no, that's not it. Do you have a photo there, Mr. Lowe? Looking for one?
You see the building, it doesn't show the garage.
I remember discussing it, though.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, if you're sure, that's fine.
Any other comments or questions?
I have a concern.
I didn't ask for concern.
Well, it's a comment then.
Yes, go ahead.
In that, the previous application was a restoration of a significant building without any real change or addition to the building. And so the money being spent is for that restoration. This is basically for a building that's been significantly altered, actually, even though it is per the Secretary of the Interior standards. There's been a sizable addition. And so I'm less comfortable in, supporting this application to the Mills Act for an owner coming in and making a sizable addition to an historic building.
Yeah, like adding fences. Adding fencing.
May I comment?
Yeah, Mr.
You
Lamone.
sure can, please.
Okay. There are obvious differences between the other project and this one. However, what I would also advise the commission is we are truly trying to make this an incentive for properties in the historic districts. And to say that your property will be treated differently if you decide to do a second-story addition to your property and you follow all our regulations and follow the
Secretary
Secretary standards, you go through our review process, you build it according to plan, and you agree to designate the property, and then to say, well, we're not going to support your Mills Act contract is, I believe, a little unfair. It also creates this question of whether or not other properties would do the same, because we feel this building's life has been extended. I mean, it was involved with an expansion, yet I think if you were to look at this building, it has the sensitivity of the era still in place. I mean, you could see that you all did a great job to make sure that addition fit in, and only you could possibly understand that that was an expansion. Maybe others that walk through the neighborhood will see that it's a charming old building and not realize there wasn't a second story. So I just want to caution you that they've already sort of agreed on that, and to take it away, I'd have some explaining to do.
I wouldn't want to put you in that position
No,
again.
it's fine.
Well, and
It's a valid point.
It's very valid.
Yeah, I can
Thank
hear
you.
Mr. Lavoie's concern, And it is a concern because, the building, the fabric of the building has changed. But I also hear Mr. Lamone in that it is somewhat unfair. It's striking a balance. But I think what's important is that from going forward from this point is that we can and we encourage the public to designate their structures and not let that designation be limiting just because of the size of the addition or the alteration, and that they don't get the Mills Act. I think that's a little discriminatory. But I hear Mr. Lavoie's concern as well.
Also, Mr. Lavoie, in the future, I think it's a legitimate question when we designate the structure, if you understand their motivation. I mean, when we had the discussion in September to designate it, I think we made it clear that they were interested in a Mills Act contract. So from a disclosure standpoint, I think it would be more advisable to say, be aware, you may not get the Mills Act contract based on this project, but if you're still willing to designate. I think it's just more like, I think today's meeting with respect to 2112 Santa Barbara Street, you clearly understand that they're agreeing to designate based on the Mills Act contract. If you would have said something similar and say, we're not willing to grant you the Mills Act or recommend granting the Mills Act contract, I think they may have a different conclusion on that designation.
As opposed to us for no reason at all other than it's a significant building and we've got to.
Well, you could still move forward. I mean, obviously.
And requested the designation.
You could have requested it, yes.
It's much better to have the owners
Cooperation.
I just want to add a little perspective.
Mr. Winnick.
Just that, because I agreed with your assessment, Commissioner Lavoie. My gut reaction is the same, except then I started thinking the proportion of how much of the money they're really getting as a tax incentive. And clearly that money, you could imagine in your mind, would have been very well dedicated to the restoration of the first floor, and that the additional cost that they spent on the second floor and everything else, that's a way and above what they're getting back as a tax incentive reduction. So I think in terms of the purpose of the Mills Act, the money actually is still going where it's supposed to be. It's going towards saving a landmark, upgrading it, and
stewardship.
Good stewardship. So I think it actually is in parity with the intention or alignment.
Thank you. That's good perspective. Ms. Hernandez.
I was going to chime in and say I think meeting the Secretary of Interior standards, especially for houses that are in these proposed districts, allowing them to add makes them continue to be relevant to the people who live in them, yet preserve our heritage, which is such a tool for us to use to really encourage people instead of making it a negative connotation with it. This is our one tool to really help the districts move forward.
Okay.
I think the scope of additions was about 200, 300 square feet, as I recall.
So fairly minimal.
Yeah.
All right.
Make motion to approve the recommendation to the city community
there you go.
development director.
Second. We have a motion by Arias and a second by Winnick. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Lamone. Thank you, Ms. Hernandez. And also want to thank the owners, the Togas, for their stewardship of this and for their willingness to go forward with the designation. Or the Mills Act contract. Next item is item number 4, 101 State Street. This is an in-progress review of refined exterior elevations and landscape plan. Planning Commission substantial conformance determination approved on August 8th, 2013 requires compliance with Planning Commission Resolution 002-13. Project was last reviewed on July 17th, 2013. Ms. Gantz, do I have those minutes, please? From July 17th, 2015? Yeah. Thank you.
I like the green trees better than the black ones.
All right.
Just give the
last time this was here,
That I don't even.
excuse me, the last time this was here was on the 17th of July, and the motion was project design approval with conditions. The openings facing State Street on the parking lot level shall be enhanced to screen the parking behind. coordinate the landscape design with the design of the project across State Street, Entrada de Santa Barbara, on the east elevation. The commission supports the Planning Commission recommendation for public art in front of the building on the State Street side, but suggested a better location near the corner so as not to interfere with the historical marker, i.e. the Lockheed plaque. The motion carried with a 7-0-0 vote. Schallenberger stepped down and Boucher was absent. Motion was made by Lavoie. And do I have a copy of the Planning Commission Resolution number 002-13? Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Please introduce yourselves for the record and give us a brief presentation.
Okay. All right. Brian Cornell here with Mark Ramasanta and Matt Grice from my office. Why don't I start with the second item there, Mr. Chair, which is the landscape and how we're going to handle that. And our landscape architect, thank you, is not here, so I may need your help, Mr. Chair, to help me on this, but my
Okay, where do I send the bill?
Yeah, you can send it
To
to him.
Now he's got to step down.
Yeah, that's right. I was $250, whatever it is. So it's our landscape architect and Mr. Suding, who is doing the landscaping across the street, coordinated plant material, as I understand it, and specifically we have some plants in common, the agave and the agapanthus. They're proposing a bird of paradise to be in the parkway planters, and they are talking about a ground cover that is the blue ice plant is across the street, and they're proposing a similar bluish succulent to coordinate with the blue ice plant. So that is what basically has been done. We also introduced and I hope it's on this plan, Matt, but a giant bird of paradise at the elevator tower as a vertical accent.
And that's what that is showing.
So their plan shows this compass rose here, and what I want to do is, if I can, Don, let me go to our site plan.
Real quickly, let me just run down the sizes of the plant material and make sure everything's okay. It won't take long.
So we talked the last time about putting the art element, that is the Planning Commission condition, on this corner. Their plan shows a compass rose, and we have an idea that we hope you will like, that I like. Instead of doing just a compass rose in the pavement, I've always wanted to do a sundial
I knew it.
that somehow works. And Matt and Alex in our office came up with what I think is just a wonderful idea, and I hope you like it. First of all, we've created this oval element because the idea is that someone can walk into this. This would be a low fountain wall, so it would be a water element that someone can literally walk into, and so it'll have a 5-foot radius so that a wheelchair can go in there, and there will be markers in the pavement that will designate the time of year, so that when when it is in the summertime, you'll be, I guess, back further, and in the wintertime forward. Is that the way it works, or is the back?
Yes, along with that.
And your shadow, the reason for the oval is that way we don't have to do, sundials typically have to have kind of an angle to help reflect when they are in a fixed position. But if the sundial, which becomes the person in this case, it moves, then that will cast the shadow appropriately along this oval and mark generally the time. Now, Mark was kidding that if it's a person that is wide,
That was my question.
it won't be as
If you're perfect line on it for a doctor's appointment, it might be a problem.
But generally, what it does is it just really, especially down in this area, it shows people where north is and kind of allows that to be interactive, and it puts a little water element with tile. We obviously have to come back to you with the details of the tile and the fountain itself. We're thinking that it's just seat height, no more than 18 inches, maybe a little lower. And it does end up working relatively nicely off the radius of the corner.
And what you have to remember too, when looking at this plan, just for the commission while we're on this, is that this line really doesn't exist.
Right.
That is not a, I'm assuming not a change in paving.
We're going to bring the brick.
Right.
We're going to continue.
Yeah.
So we won't be touching the existing brick and
The right of way, right.
tying the brick in all the way to our front door.
Right. So it really becomes
The
kind of
corner.
the intersection
That's
here,
correct.
the corner.
That's correct. So I don't know if you want me to keep going or if you want to comment on that. Okay.
Keep going.
The I've given you a package of details which is full, and I'm not going to go over all of them, but specifically what I wanted to touch on is the idea of the screens that we have. And let's actually go to the elevation first and look at those, and maybe probably go to the next sheet.
The back page, okay.
We have slightly modified the composition here in front. It's very minor, but before we had a continuous balcony along this side and we chose to break it up. We are, by the way, Mark wants this obviously to be part of the hotel campus from a visual standpoint, so the colors are going to be the same as the Harbor View is today. We're proposing the same windows that currently are in the Harbor View Annex, the one that's basically 2 doors down. And so there will be that similarity. These screens, the idea is to do this, to have this Moorish pattern that you see, but to do it as 2 layers, and this it doesn't show it precisely, but basically what it does, and we had a computer model of this that I probably should have brought you, but it really creates a beautiful, or will cast a beautiful shadow pattern inside and anywhere through this screen that we have, and it will also create that sort of extra layer which I think will help to further screen the automobiles. Instead of just being 1 layer of screen, in other words, it'll be those 2 layers of screen which work together to create that Moorish pattern. So that's what our plan is for these primary screens. We have, the other thing we changed from the last time is this tower element. We sort of simplified it. It actually, before it was something of a sort of phallic thing up there that I wasn't particularly liking, and it really wasn't too rational. So what we've done is just simplified it and created essentially large chamfers at the corner, and then this will be a simple tiled dome in a bluish kind of a tile with a little bit of pattern just at the base of that dome. And again, this wall element, before we articulated that tower all the way down almost to the ground, and it was sort of too vertical for me, and so we've simplified that as well. And then again, this is where that giant bird of paradise will be in front of that wall element. Similar kind of a screen detail up at the top there that you see. Let's see. One of the things I should point out, just so that we're sure it's okay with you, we showed these balconies on the north elevation as being cantilevered, and there are some structural complications to that for us. So what we're doing is bringing these columns all the way down to the ground. These are 8-by chamfered columns. It's not, when it's below, obviously at the ground level, these are not perfectly rational with the columns of the parking below, but it's really something that you'll never see, particularly from any vantage point that's public. You'll only see it from inside the garage.
What is, I should know this, but what is over there? That's the Bebop property, right?
That's the Bebop property. So actually this plan, the next plan is showing those where those columns land. So this was set back for landscaping, always intentionally, so we have landscaping all through this area. But it provides the ventilation into the parking garage below.
This currently is asphalt parking.
Correct. And that's a 10-foot planting area. So I will go through some of these very quickly. This is our railing detail. We have wrought iron screens. This is a screen detail that is going to be above the awnings that provides ventilation in this laundry area. This will have a decorative screen in front of the functional louver element, so that'll be a Reggio kind of a grill, not the Moorish one that I showed you before. Thank you. Some of these are pretty standard, obviously. Typical details, typical copper gutter hung off the edge, copper leader box, edge of tile. Let's see, I think these are all typical windows and doors.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I know, especially for the landscape architect.
Ouch.
Well, that's our little tower, a little more blown up. We talked about, we have this little awning detail on the south side that is incorporated, or wrought iron balcony that's incorporating an awning into it. The balcony that is, let's go to this balcony here. That is actually drawn wrong. Those are showing in both directions, but they would just be from the side.
That would be the squirrel on the top. Yeah.
This mat, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the one, this is the balcony off of State Street. Well, that's the one balcony I was just showing you. And this balcony is, our intention is, I don't think this is a 3-section balcony, but to have, this would be off Mason. Okay, thank you. These balconies. So these will have tile on the underside of them, a colored tile pattern, and then pavers on top. So that when you're looking up at the underside of these balconies, you'll see that tile pattern.
These are the deep ones, actually. That's not messed up.
Oh, so that's not happening here?
Well, it's squat. That's
So these are
15 inches deep. They're the faux balcony.
okay. So these are the deeper balconies where that'll happen on the north side. Sorry. And let's see, wood balcony detail here, which I realize looking at this, we need to show the chamfer on those. And I think that is probably it for now, and I'll open it up to, or let you open it up for questions.
Thank you. I will open public comment. I have one speaker slip, Mr. Callum DeForest. Mr. DeForest.
Thank you. Well, I commend Mr. Cornell's inventive sundial. That's going to be an interesting feature and well worth having. I'm just wondering, I vaguely remember, and maybe there was a reason why there are no trees in the parking area. It's just a big sheet of hopefully permeable pavement, but is the parking garage going underneath? I've forgotten. Thank you.
All right, I will close public comment and bring it back to the commission for questions. Commissioner Winnick, do you have any questions?
I don't. Thank you.
Commissioner Rios?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Lavoy?
Out of curiosity, who did the mathematics on the sundial?
That was Alex.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Well, that might be 2 minutes premature. We'll have to see what happens.
He just was congratulating the mathematics.
Let's see if the sun cooperates.
Commissioner Murray, any questions?
You don't have a sample of this with you, do you?
I don't have I mean, it'll be black iron
Okay.
or steel.
Commissioner Sharp, any questions?
Will you be able to see the automobiles behind that screen?
I think if you go right up to the screen, you probably can, yes, because it has a certain openness to it, but I honestly don't think you will as you're a passerby walking through here, not only because of the dual nature of the screen, but the pretty heavy landscaping that is up here in front.
And how much light will be emitted during the evening hours from the garage?
Well, that's probably, that is a function of the lights we have in there, and I don't do our electrical plans, we don't have any light cut sheets. But what I can do, Don, is we can have our engineer tell us, give us the photometrics as far as what the light level is, and making allowance for that screen.
And the same thing is true on the north side, coming out, spilling over that wall, lighting the side of the building, and we're always faced with that problem in the mouth of the garage.
That's a harder one, obviously.
I know it is.
There.
And the sprinkler heads and all that stuff. Paying attention to those details, I think, given the location and the proximity to this major intersection, is very, very important.
And obviously what these fixtures are, we need to provide those cut sheets at the same time you provide the photometrics.
That's it.
Okay. I had a question. On the sundial, would that work if it weren't raised?
Yes.
So it could be flat, flush with the pavement.
Absolutely, which I confess Mark may want to weigh in on this. He may like that better.
Seems like
I prefer not to have the water there.
Yeah, it seems like the water can. Okay. So we'll make that part of the comments
it would totally work as a pattern on the ground.
Yeah, okay. And then the second question I had was your nice little awning detail that...
down there now.
Here, I have it. Oh, this one?
There it is right here. This one here.
This one,
Yeah. Is it typical to have the canvas come down between those two posts? I'm looking in our APV guidelines and I'm seeing that kind of treatment there, and I don't see the canvas being used there. I don't know if that canvas just was never put there, or what is your inspiration?
I don't think that is necessarily a typical detail to have that.
Okay. The canvas
The
there.
canvas,
Okay.
no.
Okay. Comments? Commissioner Whittick, any comments?
Because I find it very easy to support, I just want to say, since you came back and did the study on the grills and the Moorish grills, I think that was a nice touch. It's certainly makes that whole elevation a lot nicer, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the light looks like coming through, through the screen. And so, supportive of what I saw.
Okay. Commissioner Arias?
I agree. I think that the light coming through the grills can be really, really attractive. I would urge that you seriously consider not having the water. I think it is a potential problem with somebody slipping, falling in it, a small child getting into it. Or am I going down there and putting soap suds in it? No,
Yeah.
which they also used to do at the University of Michigan, the Statue Ye Gods and Little Fishes was
And they
always
still
full
do
of
it,
soap. Yeah.
but basically.
So I think very carefully about that, because I think that could, as attractive as it might be, I think it could be a real problem. But I like the grill work. I think that's really interesting, and watching the light is going to be interesting. And I would ask the chair to respond to Mr. Senior Homewood. The question about the landscaping and the parking, it is a garage, so that there is not landscaping in it.
Okay.
Yeah, this was
Public
raised-
comment.
Yeah, the public
Right,
comment,
right,
and that question should have been answered. But I find it a very interesting project.
Commissioner Lavoy?
I agree with Commissioner Winnick's comments, not with Commissioner Reyes. We have in our guidelines the encouragement of incorporation of fountains and water elements as part of Hispanic design since the beginning in the Moors. This is a very interesting interpretation of a fountain, and I kind of look forward to it and think it will become one of those things that will be extremely popular with tourists. And I think the water incorporation is a vital part of it. And in the walking up State Street is sort of like this pause at a water element, is a cooling element. And at some point I'm going to ask for the statistics of children drowning in pools. But I think it should be encouraged as a water element and a raised element, as the architect has suggested it might be. I think the design of the building itself is coming along very nicely. Everything proposed as changes are improvements. And actually, to answer the chair's question about that particular type of awning, yes, there was usually canvas. It was quite often, though, a straight drape that hung all the way down.
That's what I was thinking.
And all of those have not been replaced on buildings where they've rotted off.
It's there because there's a sun condition on that side.
Yeah.
You know, it's amazing. We hung, parenthetically, or we hung curtains in front of our glass at our office, and in the summer I use it all the time to block the early morning sun and then open the drapes again. It works great. Surprised that people haven't put them back.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, what was your comment on that?
In support of, as designed.
I'm sorry, I was...
Good summary.
For both the fountain sundial, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that,
Okay.
and the awning, and everything else.
Commissioner Murray?
I have no additional comment, but I also support the water sundial. I think it'll be one of those things where they'll say, meet me at the Harbor View sundial fountain. So, and you could imagine postcards being, you know, like the dolphins. This will be really different. Anyway.
Commissioner Sharp, any additional comments?
I think I would vote for water in the sundial, and I think that sundial is better than Campus Rose and so forth. I'm not convinced that painting this building the same color as the rest of the campus is in your best interest. I think it shouldn't look like one entire block below it, color-wise. And as far as identity is concerned, it makes no difference in my estimation, but I would vote for a better and different color scheme.
Okay. I do need to read the Planning Commission resolution for design review. This is Planning Commission Resolution number 002-13, dated February 17th, 2013, on page 8, Design Review. Landscape species. No invasive species shall be included in the landscape plan due to its proximity to Mission Creek. I don't see any extremely invasive plants. Tree removal and replacement. All trees removed except fruit trees and street trees approved for removal without replacement by the Parks Department shall be replaced on site on a one-for-one basis with a minimum 15-gallon tree size of an appropriate species or like species in order to maintain the site's visual appearance and reduce impacts from the loss of trees. There was the loss of one jacaranda that was on the corner here. Otherwise, the property doesn't have any trees on it. So we're adding a coriacea down here, which I think is a decent mitigation for the removal of this jacaranda tree. And that jacaranda tree was apparently removed due to excavation.
Yeah, it was a little bit further over, I think.
Okay.
But yeah.
In any case, we're good there on the tree removal and replacement. Commemorative plaque, the existing commemorative plaque or other similar commemorative plaque or educational display memorializing the location of the Lockheed Aircraft Manufacturing in Santa Barbara shall be incorporated into the project. Final location and details to be approved by the Historic Landmarks Commission. You're just leaving it untouched.
Leaving it untouched,
Yeah.
exactly.
Nighttime lighting. Lighting installed in the hotel shall not be directed toward or shed light on the creek habitat and shall be minimized in areas that could result in undue nighttime lighting affecting Mission Creek. So we do need to see a lighting plan in the photometrics, Mr. Grinnell. Screened backflow device. Where is your fire department backflow? Where? Right there. Okay. You might want to beef up that screening a little bit there. Actually, you know what? I take that back. I know why it was done that way, because they need access to it.
It's hard to screen them.
It is. Location of dry utilities, above ground cabinets, so on and so forth, shall be placed in private property unless deemed infeasible for engineering reasons. If they are placed in the public right-of-way, they shall be painted Malaga green, and if feasible, shall be screened for as approved by HLC. Do you have any cabinets, any transformers?
Well, yeah, we have a transformer, which is here.
Okay. And again, those are hard to screen too,
Yeah,
because they
we
need
can't-
access.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think the fact that it's around,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
obviously a less public view here, but that's,
It's still, it's very, very close to the public sidewalk.
it was there or there,
Yeah. What color are you going to be painting that?
it would be the dark green.
Malaga green?
And it can't be subterranean?
No, they don't allow those
Edison's
anymore.
not letting that happen these days.
It's actually, it was a direction from the PUC, so it's
And
not just
I'll tell you,
Edison,
we
every
tried
utility
very
company.
hard to coordinate with Edison and try to avoid that and use just the one down by the Children's Museum, but that did not work.
Okay, trash enclosure provision. A trash enclosure with adequate area for recycling shall be provided on real property and screened from view from surrounding properties in the street, and it looks like that's where
This
you
is
are.
incorporated
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
the building. Let's go to the elevation there, because I did want to, sorry, Phil.
Otherwise I'll lose it all.
Let's go back, right here, here it is.
Which page are you on, John?
One more.
200 or
201?
201.
Thank
So
you.
that's the trash enclosure with the screen.
Right.
We are, this balcony here isn't successful right now. You can see from the side elevation, let's go back one more. Thank you. This sticks up pretty high above the roof.
Right.
I'm actually thinking at this point, after reviewing this earlier, that this really probably is more successful if I just have this be a larger balcony and sort of emulating this detail. I'll still keep the little tile roof over the stair, but otherwise just simplify it, because it sort of feels like it's sort of poking out of that roof and is a little awkward.
Isn't this the east elevation?
Yeah, that's incorrect. Yep.
Okay, can we go back to the north elevation? Okay, let's just leave it there for now.
That's,
Yeah, let me finish we just have two more. Kimberly Avenue frontage landscaping, if construction of the hotel proceeds to a point where the owner wishes to obtain a certificate of occupancy and the right-of-way for the Kimberly Avenue relocation has not been acquired, the owner shall landscape the open space on the project site between the existing right-of-way and the hotel in a manner approved by the HLC. Pardon me?
That's closed.
On
The Kimberly acquisition of our property.
Oh, okay. Okay. Public art. The applicant shall work with the HLC to incorporate some form of public art and/or fountain in the front setback in order to improve the pedestrian experience. And, you know, that's an interesting condition because public art, I guess, is art to be, in this context, is art to be enjoyed by the public. In the past, it has meant that it is art created through a process of a jury selection type thing. But I think the intent of this is that it's to be enjoyed by the public, not necessarily to be created by the members of the artistic public community.
I think you're correct.
Am I correct?
In this case.
In this case, yeah. And lastly, let's take a look at the landscape here. And I think I'm understanding this as being underneath stairs.
no,
So there shouldn't be plants there.
no, there should not be. That's a mistake.
Yeah, that's actually.
That's, yeah, the bike parking is in
Okay.
there.
And I believe that's what Mr. DeForest was referring to. And then this is within that sort of setback or that notch in
Correct,
the
that's
building.
ground. That's earth.
And what is that line there?
That's the building above.
Okay. So
Kind of cantilevers out.
you're not going to really be
Second
able to put a paper bark tree underneath the balcony.
Yeah, cross those off.
Could we look at that elevation?
The
and
north
make
elevation
sure
again.
that-
Be careful.
Oh, is that the balcony that doesn't work?
No, no, no.
No, it's around the corner.
That would be this right here.
That would be this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no.
So you're not going to be able to fit a paper bark tree in there. However, I would like to see some vertical element there because that is a elevation that needs some relief. there.
Planted, that'll come up right there.
Right.
About 10, 11 feet.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, any other comments?
In speaking to the public art component of the fountain,
Or inlay,
or inlay, fountain,
or inlay,
fountain.
or inlay.
It's your words, not mine, Mr. Chair. Stop correcting me. That the tiles indicating the dates and/or season might be done by a local craftsman in an
Yeah.
artistic sort of way.
It also has an interactive function because the people walking into it are what activate the sun.
Yeah, I think it's
Sun
a
clock, so
very clever
therefore-
concept. I really hope it
And
has
the wheelchair, to be able to go around, I think
You have to
it's
make
so-
sure it's accessible.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's great too.
Oh, really great.
Okay, I will summarize the comments then. Provide photometrics to understand what the light spill is from the garage and onto Mission Creek. Provide a schedule of light fixtures, including fixtures in the parking garage. The grill solution at the garage fenestration seems to be an acceptable solution. Carefully consider the use of water on the corner feature. Our guidelines do encourage the use of water features. The canvas at the wrought iron balcony is appropriate. Study a different color scheme than what is at the existing Harbor View Inn, the lower portion of State Street. And then restudy the planting on the north side to avoid conflict with the building. But provide screening or relief of that elevation, of the north elevation. Somebody want to make a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
does the applicant want 2 weeks or indefinite?
I'm not sure if we'll, probably indefinite.
Okay.
Can we do this in 2 weeks? We need to get in before the end of the year. What I was gonna, if I may suggest that it would probably be good to have a more intensive review at consent with
Whoever's doing the consent.
Yeah, to really look at the details and the photometrics and everything, if that works
That's
for
fine.
you all.
Yeah.
But probably we ought to make it indefinite because it may be 4 weeks.
Yeah, especially if you have other consultants that need to catch up.
Then I'll make a motion for a 4-week continuance. Or,
And that was to consent?
no,
No.
to the full board.
No.
Can we give it design approval?
It's already gotten project
It's
design
got- yeah.
approval. It's
Oh, it
now,
has?
yes,
It
it got
is in
PDA, and now
progress.
it's here for an in progress, and
Oh, then I'll change my motion to consent
it, for final, you mean?
for final.
Okay, you could give it final approval today and send it to consent for the details?
You
Okay.
know what? Fully fleshed
Yeah,
out.
that's
Zach.
fine.
You want to see it back in the commission?
Pardon me?
You think it should be back?
I do, and it's particularly
Okay.
because of the sundial water feature or
Okay.
inlay.
So 4 weeks to full board.
4-week continuance to the full board
Thank you.
with the comments as spoken by the chair.
Yeah, I think we should come back in 2 weeks so they can focus on that fountain. Because otherwise, we're going to get too close to the end of the year. It's
Okay.
4 weeks from now. is
That's
almost
fine.
the end.
Yeah, we'll
Another
come
in
back 2
progress.
weeks.
I agree.
Two
Then
weeks.
change to 2 weeks.
And then
for
presumably
another
then it would go into
in-progress review.
consent.
Right.
It'd be fine.
Yeah.
I think we should come back in 2 weeks and flush out the big items, get the photometrics done, get the fountain or non-fountain.
All the comments that I read, that's enough.
Fountain.
Yeah.
No, you're good.
So we have a motion by Lavoy.
Yes, it is.
Second by Winnick. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries.
I would like to ask the applicant to inquire as to what are the regulations regarding streaming of water in public areas
We'll have
and
to
things like
do the
that.
research.
Do some
We
research
will,
on
yeah,
this
because of the
because
liability and everything.
that's correct.
But I do agree there are lots of fountains in lots of cities and
There are lots of lawyers and lots of lawsuits and
You know, this is what makes Rome so beautiful.
Okay.
I just wanted for Mark's benefit, if there was any other, we only had one
Like
member
kids,
comment on
seen
the
them in
color.
Rome. Of course they're jumping
And I
down.
just want for Mark's benefit to understand the pleasure of the board on
Yes,
that.
that's it.
But we really didn't even review color, so I'm going to change that comment with the maker of the motion be willing to...
just walked out.
No, he's right here.
He's right here. The maker of the motion be willing to revise the comments, the motion, to say, provide color samples.
Oh, sure.
Instead of not matching the harbor view, or however I read that.
Well, that was actually Don's comments. so-
you made them in a different color scheme is what you said.
Yeah.
Well, to bring in the color scheme if,
Yeah,
since it's
I mean,
together first.
Phil, I think it's, we could always change it
we'll
last
look at
time.
it
I mean,
if we
Don's left the room. so
Yeah,
we're not
but we haven't looked at colors, and
Yeah, so
and
it's not really
I mean,
made-
I
Well, they haven't brought them in because
Right.
they were proposed, so we're asking for a different proposal, so bring them in.
okay.
All right.
So did you get that?
One,
That's okay.
provide color samples,
Provide color samples for
That's
the
it.
commission to review. Mhm.
Yeah.
So the maker of the motion is okay with that. The second?
I'm in favor. I just don't want to be disrespectful to Don because he's out of the room. And he was part of, he voted in favor. And he made the comment. Maybe I'm
Okay.
being a pain.
Well, to me, it's implied that they'd come in with new colors.
Yeah.
That's not a problem.
Okay.
It's not a problem.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
So the seconder's okay with that?
I'm okay with it.
Okay. Mr. Lamont, with your indulgence, I'm going to suggest we take a 5-minute recess. We are half hour behind.
The way it's written, it's really super beautiful.
It is. It is. It's like storytelling. Whatever. That's why I think. I'll reconvene the Historic Landmarks Commission of October 23rd, 2013 meeting. City staff, does TV need to be made aware?
It's okay, you can go ahead.
The next item on the agenda is item 5. It's a discussion item, training for the average unit density incentive program. Mr. Lamone will be presenting.
Yes, Jaime Limon, Senior Planner. I'm here along with our City Planner, Betty Weiss, so she's going to jump in there when she feels like I'm...
You said something wrong.
Once you shake your head.
That it is I wanted to explain, it is a two-parts training session. We thought it was very important to sort of lay the framework on your role and your general functions before we get into the specifics about our proposed AUD program and how the review process is planned to be altered a little bit. I think the city planner would be to come back to you to propose or to outline those changes. The statement I wanted to make to begin this training was that there is a lot of information that we're providing. You've received the outline, and I know some of it is redundant or you have a lot of knowledge. But I think it was important to go through that mindset to understand what this commission's functions are, because I heard some statements related that somehow the AUD program was changing what you do. And my purpose of trying to explain your role and distinguishing it between the planning commissioner's role would make an argument that in reality, when you review projects, your design issues are similar whether or not the planning commission reviews the project. That you ultimately have the authority as you review a project to determine architectural style, to comment on size, bulk, scale, design, height, anything that you feel is appropriate or compatible with the neighborhood. And ultimately, that's what we're asking you to do when you see these projects move forward. So we also will end the presentation today with some examples of the types of projects that were approved, whether they were reviewed by the Planning Commission that you had your input on, and your input guided the development. Now, whether they were successful or widely praised, it's up to public opinion. But I think the controversy is always there when you approve something. What will it turn out? And over time, I think that you'll see the public does accept these buildings more readily, especially if they're well detailed and architecturally prominent and meet all your guidelines. So I'd like to begin the presentation by, again, quickly going through some of the background material that we prepared. I think
Going all the way back to 1959.
Is this ready to go? Start show? Okay. This one? Okay. So I just wanted to lay out some history to explain that we do have some basis for requiring design review. There are state laws that allow local communities to protect and enhance historic resources. It's been around for a while. We also have El Pueblo Viejo established by ordinance in Santa Barbara. So we've had this level of control for downtown. If you look at the major buildings that have been constructed, there has been design review that have guided the construction of those buildings. The Advisory Landmarks Committee was formed and eventually led towards a dual review with ABR, where you had two commissions, boards looking at a design of these structures downtown. And the Advisory Landmarks Committee was instrumental in doing an inventory initially for designating our original landmarks and defining El Pueblo Viejo district. We have a strong historic structures ordinance that was crafted, established with the committee's authority and duties were, along with, again, the voters agreed that this commission should be a commission. A charter amendment was voted upon and established the Historic Landmarks Commission as a commission. The purpose of the HLC, again, is to safeguard the heritage of the city, provide protection of landmarks. That's primarily the basis of why we have El Pueblo Viejo, to try to protect these landmarks downtown. General functions, again, these are the typical actions you take on a monthly basis, of meeting to meeting, dealing with designations and looking at every design review application for exterior modifications in EPV. That's a large, wide cast of review authority. We've also expanded it in the years recently to also include historic resources outside EPV. So not only are you looking at EPV, you're actually looking at all these structures outside EPV that we've now placed on the potential list or have designated. Some of the primary goals, again, are outlined in your guidelines. Some of the things that are really your central authority, it has to do with the visual character of the city. I mean, your hands and input often determine whether a project can move forward. That's the authority you have. We've even strengthened that authority by providing direct comments to the Planning Commission on whether or not you support a project. The Planning Commission, using this project compatibility analysis, we thought we enhanced your authority to make it very clear that even though a project was or is to be reviewed by the Planning Commission, ultimately it has to return here, and you are conveying to the Planning Commission whether you will support this project from a design standpoint. We think that authority is still there for you on any project that comes through the city. Primary goals, again, promote high design standards and promote neighbor compatibility. That has always been your purview. Your purview is to decide whether this building fits into the block, the neighborhood, its setting. We have a myriad degree of guidelines that you use to determine whether a project is consistent and can be approved. And those guidelines serve as a framework to determine whether or not you can support a project. Often that's one of the reasons cited as you move a project forward. It's consistent with your guidelines, or it's not consistent. It's also the basis for denying a project. If you don't think it meets the guidelines, all it takes is a majority of this commission to say no. Again, your design review role is primarily based on this: to provide design review comments, approvals or denials, and compatibility analysis for all uses within the review area. What we mean by uses is our development applications. Development applications that come forward to say we want to use this property in this manner, whether it's a minor change that they want to have, a parking lot, to a new building, a new site development. Projects deemed highly visible to the public may be referred to the Planning Commission. This is something that Mr. Rios brought up with the project at Mission Estate. Should we review or send a project to the Planning Commission? And that's something that's going to be discussed with Ms. Weiss as far as whether that is going to be a standard requirement for AUD projects. But we do want to cite that is always your prerogative to send projects, but we want to counsel you on when we think it's a highly visible project or whether or not there will be any value for the Planning Commission to look at it. In other words, you're sending it to them for what reason? Again, not necessarily for an approval, but for maybe some decision. But is the decision based on size, bulk, and scale? Is it based on architectural design? Because that's your role. That's your role. So we don't necessarily want you to punt it if it's in fact your role.
If it's land use, it would be more likely to go.
Well, again, we typically have brought projects forward to you indicating that it is an approved land use for that project site. So it's rare that we will come in and propose a project that doesn't comply with zoning and doesn't comply with the land use. We do a zoning check. So it's not really the issue. It's a question, again, what is the reason you would refer it up?
Because it's highly visible.
Is it okay to ask questions during your...
Or do you prefer to go through
Sure, go ahead.
So I just wanted to follow up on this. And actually, it's interesting to me because I've been approached by somebody about an AUD project. It wouldn't be in the purview of this board, but instead of at ABR. It actually sort of surprised me. It's like, oh, wow, this doesn't require a planning commission application. It's basically just goes to ABR and that's it, presumably, unless they kicked it upstairs. But I think maybe one of the ways of making it feel easier for us in terms of not such a daunting task is, can we get staff recommendations? I know, like when I present at the county and it's in front of MBAR or something, usually the project is recommended to the staff, gets a staff recommendation right off the bat. And I'm wondering if on projects like this that are more complicated, that seem to have more of a land use analysis, perhaps that happens ahead of time. It's kind of what you said. You wouldn't put it in front of us without it having passed muster. But could it also even get more staff, more staff discussion about it? Like, this project is highly supportable because of these points and it meets these criteria.
I'll respond briefly.
Thanks.
That actually is staff's proposal, is that in looking at the average unit density, these rental housing projects coming through, is that very early on, perhaps after one concept review at your commission, we would then have the project reviewed by an internal land development team, and the staff would return answering questions that came from your first meeting. We would really encourage the commission as well as the public. We noticed those first meetings at your commission to ask the questions for staff to be able to come back and answer at the next meeting.
Great.
As well as provide recommendation on whether or not we think this project would benefit from Planning Commission review, and what questions or issues would you as a commission or staff think that the Planning Commission should focus on. So that was roughly our proposal at the joint meeting that was held a month or so ago. The reason why we're here with these two discussions is to help us all get grounded again. What is it that the HLC does, and then what's this land use issue that people are concerned about, and how do we manage it? And so then at the next meeting, we'll come back and review with this commission again an idea we have on how to involve the Planning Commission and when. And then we'd like, hopefully at the conclusion of your second discussion, that we're all a little more comfortable with how we want to handle these larger projects.
Great, thanks.
But staff support is a critical change that we think, in order for these projects to be successful overall with support to this commission in your decision making, we think a different way of providing staff support to you is necessary.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, so the design review process typically involves, again, discretionary land use decisions are conceptually reviewed by the HLC, and then referred to the Planning Commission or staff officer. That's the majority of projects that you see. Typically, in the years past, Planning Commission was required because there was an actual condominium subdivision requirement that guided that review process, or some type of zoning modifications that needed to have that decision, or a coastal development permit. So yes, the majority of projects were being reviewed by the Planning Commission. Now we have a different set of criteria for what City Council has decided. They've decided that this density question is a right, an ordinance allowance, and therefore you don't have a trigger to get a density question discussed at the Planning Commission, per se. So this is the change. We have now apartments that are coming forward that may just be as large as these condominium developments. There might be more units, and obviously the parking issue is a dynamic of that. But I wanted to make sure that you understood that even if we required Planning Commission for these projects, there could conceivably be that decision made by the Planning Commission saying, yes, we agree with the density. Now it's back at your table. Now, do you agree with this size of building? So you still have that dynamic happening that, are you accepting the size and bulk scale and height of this building? And to me, that's the similar, whether it's a condominium or apartment complex, you still have that question coming forward. And our process allows appeals. And whether it's an apartment or condominium a project, you can appeal those decisions. And in fact, you're seeing some of that come forward with this program where people feel a little comfortable. And we're trying to get through that phase where we feel that the process allows for enough input, enough review. So what we have outlined to typically are the type of issues here that you are in the middle of. It's a complicated process because it involves a lot of dynamic changes and a lot of unique proposals site to site. What may be appropriate on one neighborhood may not be appropriate around the corner because there's a historic resource. There's concerns about the height here where you don't have buffering structures to help disguise the mass and scale. And we have some examples at the end where you could see that dynamic plane. You've also had some interaction between the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission where you've had some conflicts with what the Planning Commission feels is appropriate and what you feel is appropriate. The architectural style typically is not debated as much because the mandate for EPV is you have to have an architectural style. Yet it plays out with the ABR. There are struggles at the ABR about what particular style should occur in different parts of the city. And obviously historic preservation is coming to the forefront because we're dealing with buildings being built in close proximity to our city landmarks. And we've got those criteria spelled out now somewhat in our historic resource element that you may consider those impacts in trying to develop an appropriate design compatible with those adjacent buildings. Typically, again, you get into landscape designs, whether or not projects could be approved, whether a tree could be removed. I mean, those are controversial items that neighborhoods care about. And overall, when a project comes in a concept reviewed, your initial take on the development application should be on, is this site design appropriate? I mean, that is really when you talk about how an architect designs a building, they come in and say, I've got a conceptual design here that involves this orientation, this general bulk mass scale, and is this okay to move forward? That is the time to not bring up necessarily details about windows or eaves. I mean, you're talking a big picture, and that's when we want to have feedback to these applicants that, wait a minute, this is too aggressive, or this is oriented incorrectly, we don't necessarily agree with this. Study this, return back with a different design, hopefully, or you could be positive. You could be saying, we love this design, and move forward, and it gives them the applicant a general direction. Rather than, not being specific, being a little vague about support, and then turning it into a big issue later on in the third or fourth review where the applicant feels vested enough that they've expended a lot of design expense, and then you're being told, well, we're not very we don't think this has moved sufficiently. We think you should be sent to the Planning Commission. That's not our process. We'd like to be able to come back maybe on the second review when Betty's going to outline this process where that would be the decision point where we think the controversial issues could be explained, and any questions you may have of staff could also be further elaborated on. Sure.
I have a question, if this is okay to ask.
Sure.
Could it be that, one of the problems I saw in hindsight is that could HLC make a recommendation, for instance, the subdivisions or lot merging or something? I think that was some of the key issues where we have really no say how those lots get merged. And that once the lot is merged, then you are subject to a large, a high-density large project. And I think that was the problem with one of the Chapala project, in other words,
It increased the building site.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's, to me, that is ultimately a dilemma, because if someone has had approval of the lot merging and coming here and propose a project, how do you say that this lot merging is not compatible with the neighborhood? I mean, look at Brinkerhoff. All those lots are small, deep, narrow lots, and so the ones on Chapala were like that, and so you have the two lots merged. All of a sudden, it's a village. It's a huge thing, and you cannot stop that. I mean, they've been approved to get this lot merging because they are proposing a large project. I just, as a commissioner, I cannot just say, oh, well, this is just not compatible in any way. You just eventually, anyway, I have that dilemma. And I wondered if there's room for this commission to make a recommendation to the Planning Commission when they are acting under one of their most important roles, is that they approve lot subdivisions or whatever. And could we say, this is a good thing you're doing, but maybe building-wise, it's going to affect the neighborhood no matter what. I mean, it's a problem. I don't know how. I'm just raising these issues.
Just a thought on, again, distinguishing between the Planning Commission and the HLC,
Yeah.
and how your input on projects like that is really important. The project that you just saw, the prior item on that agenda, on your agenda today, did go to the Planning Commission because one of the land use entitlements that they wanted is uniquely the authority of the Planning Commission, and that was that there was a transfer of development rights. The actual size of that project on that more or less vacant lot down in Mason and State right now, in order to amass that much floor area for the hotel, they needed to have a transfer. And they also did ask for modifications of frontage because it has 3 frontages, Kimberly, Mason, and State. And it's in the coastal zone. So when you look at what the Planning Commission did, it's really clear under the municipal code, state law, modifications, why they were reviewing that project. And your concern about mergers, right now, the Planning Commission doesn't review mergers either.
Okay.
Unless, let's pretend for a minute that this lot was actually 3 lots, little lots, and they merged it, and as a result, they were able to propose a larger building. Then the Planning Commission, the rules are that if you merge 3 lots and build 3,000, 3,000, 3,000, combine, any development of over 3,000 square feet of new non-residential, that does go to the Planning Commission. But what we're talking more about today is residential. And if you merge 3 lots and it's mixed use, residential and commercial, that might end up popping it to the Planning Commission. So anytime that you review a project and it's going to the Planning Commission, all aspects of the project design, the site as a whole, as a large site, your comment on challenging design considerations and development now that they've amassed the sites, that's within your purview. If you see something that's like now, a 500-foot long building elevation, and you would rather see it broken up into smaller building components, that's HLC authority. My opinion is that's your authority with or without the Planning Commission review. But if the project is going to the Commission, that would be something you want to comment on and get, their input on. But again, this project that you saw earlier today, and you look at the Planning Commission conditions, a few unique conditions that the HLC might not normally have really are related to the coastal review, like a visitor information item, how it relates. But when you read your HLC, the conditions as your chair did, I was listening to these. These are all things that the HLC could do, and you do. You ask for public art elements and projects, not unique to the Planning Commission. You look at tree replacement. You look at where the backflow device is. So just this earlier review was, for me, really kind of highlighting that a lot of what the project ultimately is, design and development and the visual effect, is really this commission's work. And when we have projects come to this commission and the planning commission, and the issue is design, it's really awkward because you have these two commissions dealing with the same subject. Versus this project, the commission dealt with the visitor serving issues, the placement of the building and the modifications, whereas in this AUD program, we just went through hearings with the commission and with the council, and they set what the new setbacks are. And if people build to the new setbacks, it doesn't require a modification. The AUD also established the allowed density. So this is what Jaime is saying, with these average unit density projects, there aren't these land use decisions. So what we're here to talk with you about is, you see the projects first. You see them before staff sees them most times. And so you all are really critical in setting the parameters. This is a large corner. We want open space here. Where's your driveway? Is it coming through the middle on a busy street? Is it along the back? Do you have enough depth to get an underground parking garage? You've asked all these same difficult design and site development questions that the Planning Commission asks. And in fact, you work on them for months before they even see them. So that was kind of the issue that we wanted to talk with you about. Yes, we can talk about land use, but in the AUD, there aren't these land use decisions anymore. It is primarily a design. Project review, really, and staff support, because of the nature of the projects that you need more information on what Public Works would require, and are there unique building code issues, like there should be 3 elevators because of the size of the building and the exiting and things like that. You need that technical support to know, there has to be 3 elevators, so how should they design it and things like that. So, and again, on that board, these are your regular design issues that you all work with.
Okay, continuing on. So issues outside of HLC purview, we've had occasions where I've come in and spoken to you about sometimes getting out of that comfort zone where you wanted to talk about things that technically are not within your purview. And when we meet about land use decisions, when we discuss that, it's the type of comment that says, well, this use shouldn't be here. Well, I mean, it's not an appropriate location. If the zoning ordinance allows it, it's really not within your purview. Now, is the building too large for that use? That's within your allowed. Is it too high? But if it's per ordinance, it's kind of difficult to tell an applicant you can't build within the zoning ordinance. We've had that debate happen. But it's part of your comments. Why is it too high for this neighborhood?
Okay, excuse me.
Yes.
If it's too high based on neighborhood compatibility adjacent
Yes.
to a landmark, then we get to discuss it.
Yes, but questioning whether or not the building is entitled to be up 3 stories. You're allowed that story. It's always your issue of compatibility, so you have that right. We've had a recent project where that question came up at the ABR, and they removed a floor. I mean, it was because they were saying they were having some angst with the height of the building. Okay. But it wasn't like you can't have a 4th story. How are you going to respond to our concerns? It's the applicant's response.
Question, this goes back to Ms. Weiss. If I understood you correctly, you said that the setbacks are established by the AUD.
It's in the zoning.
An applicant comes in and is built, or is proposing to build setback to setback. We have the purview to increase that setback if the project deems that that's necessary because it's next to a historic resource or it's just not compatible with the neighborhood. But by the AUD establishing the setbacks, that's not necessarily an entitlement to them, or is it?
That's correct. A project could come in and meet all the setbacks that are established, and then through the design process, you think you need greater relief and setback in a certain area. In fact, one element that's new in the average unit density program is the concept of variable setback. And that was done specifically to have more flexibility in the design process without requiring a modification.
Right.
So, and the AUD established a new setback in commercial zones that currently doesn't exist. You all might, and I'm sorry, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves into the next meeting where we want to go into more detail, but remember back to Measure B and the height limitation, and there was a time when alternatives were being trying to negotiate an alternative.
Remember too well.
And this idea came up primarily because HLC, when you see projects downtown, most of the projects you see are in commercially zoned and no setbacks are required. Well, we actually put a new setback in for commercial zones, this new 5-foot variable setback, because your review process usually resulted in that. So, yes, to answer your question, my point of saying that it established a setback is that we're hoping to avoid modifications with the establishment of setbacks in commercial zones where there aren't any now, and this variable. So it's more likely that the projects won't need planning commission under the typical land use reviews, because this new ordinance set new, what the planning commission called incentives. That's what's so funny about this when we talk more about this, that when the PC was reviewing the ordinance, they were very much in favor of these new incentives. And yet, those incentives kind of took them out of the review process. And now we're all trying to figure out how to keep them or bring them back into this review process.
I just want to add one other thing. There's also open space requirements in it too, just so you know.
Yes.
So,
Right.
so there's setbacks and open
Right.
space. So it's not like it's totally foreign. It's not like all of a sudden we've got a commercial code that's letting you build from property line to property line.
Well, I haven't studied the average unit density setbacks, but I'm assuming that they are less than what the current setbacks are.
Yes,
Because that's the
yes.
incentive.
Correct, they are.
Right.
But not for commercial.
But not in commercial zones.
In commercial, it doesn't make
But
sense.
the high
Just
density
residential or
housing.
mixed use.
Yeah, that's the.
Right. We have a whole table that compares the current code and the proposed code, and we'll walk through that with you at your next session.
Okay. Thank you.
Continuing on, we've had questions brought by the public with concerns about the number of parking spaces. Again, another incentive put into the program to allow reduced parking. Is it your purview to say there's not enough parking if they're meeting a code ordinance allowance? It translates in reduced parking for projects as opposed to previous projects that had a condominium development where we had a lot of parking being provided. So that translated into larger structures. So we actually have less parking should translate to less impacts, having parking drive the size of projects. Approval of zoning modifications, so how careful we are to allow you to comment in a certain way of modifications. It's not that this commission is approving zoning modifications. You're actually just commenting on whether that should be support and whether it's consistent with the site and location. This is the Planning Commission's role, again, making land use decisions. And when we talk about making land use decisions, it's the type of projects that Betty outlined where you have this conditional use permit or a development plan or something that, again, that involves those decisions. Zoning ordinance decisions in connections with modifications, variance, site plans, development plans, that's typically what we deal with the Planning Commissions. And yes, there are less projects going to the Planning Commission. We're questioning whether it does make sense to not send some of these projects if they're not as busy as they typically are. And if they're waiting, they want to see some of this. This is some of the discussion that we'll have next time. And there's obviously their role is to make recommendations to City Council regarding amendments to the zoning ordinance. That's their role. Here they are, some more information about the type of decisions they make. And I wanted to speak about environmental review hearings because, again, concern about these findings that we placed on you at the last minute for this project, and I apologized again for that. But your role has been for quite some time to deal with negative declarations that do not have planning commission reviews. We've sent projects to the design review boards to have these environmental hearings. The ABR has struggled with it also. We place a large initial study and a negative declaration in front of them and say we're going to have an environmental hearing, and they're saying, are we supposed to read this? Yes, I mean, you're confirming staff's decision with respect to this project and making the appropriate findings. That's something that was, again, directed to be done as part of a decision when I guess we got rid of the Environmental Review Committee and tried to make these decisions more helpful and not have to involve more process. Why have a hearing at the Planning Commission if we can have it here with your decision to approve the project? And before we get into the examples, this is a map that...
Hold on there just a minute, Mr. Lamone.
Yes.
And you know this is a bone of contention with
Yes.
me. We are volunteers.
Yes.
And we do this out of, the goodness and the desire to make the city better. And, it is hard to do when we are tasked with. And again, they're not more tasks. I mean, you said that we're doing them anyway, but if Planning Commission is sitting there and they don't have anything to do, I guess I'm just asking, why are we doing it? Why did you why was the decision made to transfer this responsibility onto the HLC ABR?
I'd like to respond to that. I would not characterize this as transferring responsibility to you. The HLC has charter and ordinance authority and responsibility for review of these buildings in El Pueblo Viejo. So that is already your responsibility. So what is changed is, given the size and density of these projects and like how they're being designed under the new ordinance. In the prior ordinance, they probably would have also gone to a planning commission for a density modification or a parking modification or something like that. So what's happened is you don't have your companion, commission also reviewing the project. We haven't added it on your plate because you already have this project on your plate. But what's happened is the nature of your review as the exclusive body, the only body reviewing it, that's what's different. And again, this is a little perplexing because when we developed the ordinance, it was developed specifically to be as directive and incentive-based and allowing this density so that the Planning Commission review wasn't required. But where we are now is, okay, well, if that's the case, what does the HLC or the ABR need now that Planning Commission isn't seeing these? You need to know more about this program. You need to know that it does meet all these new rules. You need to know if, given in its location by a busy intersection, are there transportation? You at least need to have information, and staff needs to help you and the public that has questions about the project hear them and answer them here. So it has added to your responsibility in terms of the hearings and the questions. But it was here already, so I guess it's a matter of semantics. I don't necessarily think that...
Perhaps transfer of responsibility was not the correct terminology, but it is. It's a heavier workload.
It's an increase. It is. It's right for everybody, and we want to do a better job at it because we really want to see these projects be successful. So we can't just expect that it's just going to happen. It's going to take more work, and I agree. I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry to vent that, but
that's true. That's the issue.
Question.
Ms. Arias.
You mentioned, going back to the parking spaces, you mentioned that the smaller units require less parking.
Yes,
How do you justify that since you cannot control how many people are in a unit or how many cars they own?
The issue of what the parking requirement would be for these projects was again, discussed in many, many hearings. Back at the City Council, when they adopted the general plan in December 2011 and leading up to that, there was a big debate. Should there be even the concept of a maximum number of parking spaces? Well, that was controversial and decided by the council not to use a maximum. So the ordinance is still a minimum of one parking space per unit, and an applicant can propose more parking. At one time, the commission and council were considering 1.5 parking spaces per unit. And the decision was deliberately made to have it be one parking space per unit. And Mr. Dayton will tell you that when the council was making that decision, he said this will not always meet the parking demands of the projects. He was quite upfront about that. That in some instances, it's going to be enough parking, and in other instances, possibly too much parking, but certainly in some, it will not be enough. And it's a rub or a challenge, and the idea is that if an applicant wants to propose this minimal amount, and that helps bring the building size and costs down, that was seen as a benefit.
Incentive.
Yes. And so we don't know that this is the perfect equation in all instances, but that tough decision has been made. And now we're all trying to carry it out the best we can, but that's the standard.
If you have a project that has commercial, and yet if the commercial doesn't succeed, they want to make the residential units, the demand for commercial parking is different than the demand for the residential.
actually higher.
How is it dealt with?
It's higher, actually. I mean, if you don't mind my jumping into it, because...
Okay.
The example that you just gave, I'm trying to follow, is like
Arlington
if somebody
Village.
did a change of use of an existing
Arlington
building.
Village has units that are commercial that have a kitchen in them, and they said in front of us that if the commercial doesn't work, they'll make them residential.
My understanding on that particular project is that the space that would have required one parking space, so it's really the same. One parking space for 250 square feet of area, or one parking space for a 500 square foot apartment. So anyway, that's... The council did not change the parking requirements for commercial as part of the AUD. The parking requirements for the AUD are related to residential development. So if you have mixed use...
I think part of the problem with that particular project was we were being shown a set of plans that looked an awful lot like an apartment with a bathroom and kitchen and a bedroom, and we're being told that it was commercial and mixed use. And when questioned about it, was sort of like blown off like any other of our concerns about, you don't need to worry about that, and I'm sorry, but we do now. I brought it up. I asked her. I said, this doesn't look like commercial space to me. This looks like an apartment. You've even shown me a bed and chairs and sofa. This is not an office, or this is not a commercial space unless that's the business.
Right, but
Did you get any additional benefits by proposing the commercial?
They did. They had a setback because it was a mixed-use building. They had a relief from the setback from the garbage enclosure.
I could tell you that now under the AUD, and even in that project, it really, that isn't necessarily the purview of the HLC or necessary. It wouldn't make a difference if it was mixed use or all residential under the average unit density.
Right.
Because people used to do this a lot at your commission or the planning commissions, carve out a little bit of the building and say it's commercial, therefore it was mixed use and didn't need setbacks. Well, the ordinance just did away with that. The planning commission wanted us to. Why require setbacks differently in a commercial zone if it's mixed use or residential, and they decided that no setback is required?
You know, there's probably, just since we've gone this much detail, and I know it goes a little longer, but I think point out two things. In the parking requirements, it also has required parking of bicycles, one per unit, which have to be covered and secured. And then it also, the market rate apartments are the one that are one per unit.
if it's a condo and it's a different economic bracket, it actually is a higher requirement of parking, from my understanding of the code. So I think it goes up to 1.5 in that instance, once you get to certain apartment sizes. So,
Again, we'll go over the details next time, but Commissioner
Winnick.
Winnick has brought up a point of something that is definitely new, is you will be seeing and looking at how do we deal with bicycle parking. And that's a design consideration, and that will be more of a new focus than you've had in the past, definitely.
Just a quick question. Do we then have, if we feel that the project needs more parking, we have that purview?
Actually,
No.
no.
Okay.
It wouldn't really be up to you to determine that they need more parking. That-
Okay.
The parking
Is set by the
It's
ordinance.
sort of,
set by the
ordinance
And
zoning.
if, this is a little odd, but, if they're proposing more than the minimum parking required, and you think that that's making the building too big, again, you say, this building is too large, and we think we don't like this section view down to a parking garage and a platform. This design's not working.
It's too large to deal with it.
Yeah, they may end up dealing with it by reducing.
You've added more parking, so.
Or reducing the units.
Right, okay, I understand.
Or
Asking for more parking you wouldn't really have the basis to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
or identifying that the parking is too visible for the site. That's some
That's our
of the
purview.
concerns
That's
that you
definitely our purview. Yeah.
It doesn't meet the urban design guidelines,
Right.
that type of
Right.
commentary. So what we've included here is also the map that indicates where development can be built at its highest. And as you can see, the majority of that downtown core is 60 feet. So conversely, you're going to have the largest size buildings being proposed for this commission,
Right.
as opposed to the ABR. You're going to have more decisions to make with respect to the height of structures. And you'll see in some of these examples where you either feel you were successful or not. But we also will show you that the council also targeted, or the planning commission, these opportunity sites, which is even narrowed the focus of, you'll see development where the city says this is a good location for these buildings. So when you come to a commission and you're being told, no, don't build here, sort of a mixed message of, is the incentive in the right location in the city? And we'll get into that. So, examples of large projects. I picked this one on purpose.
Challenging, it's not difficult.
Challenging, difficult, whatever you want to use. But just to give you a sense that there was this density that was being introduced into these buildings, and even high with respect because these condos were large. I mean, large units and large buildings.
Big
and still have
volumes.
some density concerns. And just what happened with respect to sort of telling the story, what the issues were, what made this building difficult to design. Sometimes you had a creek setback you had to deal with, the building height, the mass, the mixed-use nature of it. Again, large residential use size, the buffer to adjacent multifamily zoning. I have the Google Street View, so I think maybe that was one thing that we really didn't realize when you see this building from different angles.
Yeah.
I'll show you that with the next slide here. Let me see if I can. Trying to use new technology.
Your hyperlink worked.
Let's see if it, let's see if it opens up.
Yeah, you got it.
So is that a yes or no?
Say no. Say no.
You're asking us.
I'll make a motion.
Quick, everybody, get in.
How many of us have an opinions?
There we go. I don't know if that's the view I wanted you to see, but you can go up the street and see how this.
Go down the street, actually.
Oh, this is Gutierrez
Okay.
side. Oh no, is that Chapala side?
No, it's Gutierrez.
That's Gutierrez.
Yeah. They have a garage entrance on Gutierrez.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the building, as you know, but let me show you what I thought was kind of interesting about this, is this view. When I started thinking about what was the concern, is you see from the corner Della Vina and...
Yeah, look at that.
Can you click full screen down in the lower right-hand corner? Or, there we go.
That.
There.
Where it really was prominent as viewed from the other neighborhood side,
Oh,
not
wow.
necessarily Chapala Street
Interesting.
side. And
how you evaluate these buildings sometimes is critical, whether you ask for the model.
I wasn't here. No, I wasn't.
Yeah, it's a beautiful large building.
But the problem with that project was
The challenge.
once that, no, the problem
sorry.
with that building, I was here, was that the applicant had the opinion that once he got a buy-in by one group, he could ignore everything else he heard.
Yeah, I've got planning commission.
Well, in fact, the Planning Commission directed a change. I mean, this is why I think we also want to be very careful about what are we sending these projects to the Planning Commission for. Specifically, what is their authority and discretion or commenting? What do you want their input on
They
these
might say
projects
yes,
when
they
they
say
don't need
no.
modifications?
Well,
And they don't need density. This project was set in motion in a different direction based on the Planning Commission decision. And I know that the HLC didn't necessarily
well, no,
like
the
that.
HLC started with the building.
Uh-huh.
They modified the building, and we were reasonably happy with it. And then the Planning Commission pushed it away from the creek.
Exactly.
And squeezed the building up. And then they came back to us and said, this is what the Planning Commission did to us. We don't have to listen to you anymore.
See, and this is what we...
To be rude.
Well, this is
That's what
what
they
is to
told
be
us.
avoided. The thought was with the AUD, by not having
Redundant.
more review process, it was seen as an incentive for rental housing.
Yes.
And so
That's a good thing.
we still
It's a
want
good
to
thing.
be able to do that.
It's a good well,
Yeah.
But the problem is, speaking to Tuesday's appeal, that because I have this lovely project and it meets the AUD and I'm building low cost or market rate apartment buildings, I'm done.
Well,
No.
staff doesn't believe, and again, we'll...
I have a long letter from Mrs. Plowman. I'm done. And that's the problem. They need to be aware. I mean, and it's only certain applicants. Certain applicants know they need to work with us, and,
Yes,
and they do.
they do.
And we get lovely projects out of them time after time with no problems at all. It's that attitude that needs to be dismissed, that no, yes, you have a project that the city wants, and it meets all of the setbacks and all of the guidelines, but you need to make these people love your project.
Mr. Leroy, also, that was the instigation behind trying to create the compatibility analysis.
Yeah.
Where it was very clear that if you're not happy with respect to the project design, you would state that to the Planning Commission, and they have the prerogative to move forward with those negative comments, because you would say why the project, upon its return, will not get approved.
Or
Came
if the
about because of
project,
the NPS.
or if the project is not going to the Planning Commission,
Yes.
you don't approve it unless you can affirm it.
Right.
Affirm
And I made comments based on the compatibility analysis.
Right.
And they were
Well, again, you have to have a majority with any decision.
And it is-
And making your case.
Not a completely objective set of standards, and that's why there are
That's true.
9 people
Yeah.
on this commission to debate these things, and and with the interface, the dialogue with an applicant that's responsive or determined or whatever. Each one is different.
Okay, let's fly through these last examples, and I think they'll generate revisiting of decisions. This again, Paseo Chapala, again, another dense project, condos. That was the merger issue. But again, you clearly approved the demolition of those smaller structures. There was a debate about whether they were historic. Came back, you knew the project was large. And I think, again, the struggle was whether or not the building should have a setback, because should it be at the street? This idea of the urban design guidelines meeting the mixed use right at the street on the lower level, and whether the building should be set back on its upper levels. Again, that was a decision to allow that height, and some people felt that was too tall of a building without any relief coming back. Now we have a I think we've had some discussions about trying to get a little planter in front of a building, right? So now we have this setback, hopefully, that would allow you to give that more relief and set the building a little bit back for that.
And as Chair Suding said, as a starting point.
Right.
If you don't think that
You
a
can't
5-foot
negotiate the
setback
2 feet or
in
1
this
foot of
section
umbrella.
is sufficient, and you want to see variable, greater, or whatever, that's a design consideration.
Right. Okay, so let's see.
But
if
on this point too is, I think this commission with some applicants, I'm thinking, like I remember Brian Cornell on the Yananali condos, you know, how many units were together in one building and where the open space is, and is it a mass of, you know, essentially 8 units, or do you want to see them broken up into a couple of 4-unit buildings? All those kinds of things are within the purview of HLC,
Let's turn this around.
and the earlier the better when you're commenting on the site plan. It's a big site. One big building is or isn't going to work here. We'd like to see 3 buildings separated with open
There it
space
is.
and things like that.
Yeah, that corner and whether or not getting too much building towards
And I think the
street.
earlier design by this architect here did have the second or the third story set back further.
It also had a bigger chunk out of the corner at De La Guerra.
Yeah, so,
And that just sort of went away.
yeah.
And you know, this dual review also sometimes causes that, as Betty was mentioning, you know, it
Yeah.
goes off and then it comes back. If it stays with one board commission, you will continue to see and ask for those changes
Yeah.
and don't have to approve them.
Yeah, this was a classic mommy daddy. I can see it. I wasn't there, but it's totally. It's like, jeez.
Here we have one that we've included that was 210 West Korea Street, Radio Square. It was a project that you worked diligently on with respect
They were
to
after learning.
you know, the design, how it impacted the historic resource next door, it transitioned. You had a lot of discussion about how it would go up to 3 stories. Livability of the units, light and air, you got into the Paseo design.
Hey, which one is that one?
Let me see if I have that.
Radio
There it is.
Square. Which is Radio
This
Square?
is what was approved. I know it's small scale, but you can see on the right there the structure that was used as a buffer.
I'd like to make a comment on this one. If this project was coming through today and going through the review process like it did, I think staff would probably recommend this project as one that would go to the Planning Commission, because what happened through the HLC review is the push-pull between design and density really came up. This project, I think, lost 10 to 14 units as a result of the review process, design review process. So in this effort to create more rental housing, if the design review process is going to result in a substantial loss of units, that's probably when this commission and staff should be saying, let's bring this to the PC and make sure if they would be comfortable with a bigger box, I'll just call it a bigger box, maybe we need to work harder to get there, or maybe we want the council to know when this goes on appeal, you know, what the commission thinks and what what the HLC thinks about what's right for this location. If the design review process results in an improved design without really compromising the objective of the rental housing, then that's win-win. If the design review process, in order to get a comfortable design that this commission feels is right for the location and all that, really reduces the density in a project, then that's probably when we should find out from the Planning Commission, you know, where would they stand on the project.
Here we have Alma del Pueblo, again, one where pretty dense location, 24 units per acres, a lot of parking being provided for the condos and the commercial use, all underground, and concerns about preservation of views to Arlington Theater, consisting with urban design, how close should it be to the corner and to orientation of the building. There were bridges and roof decks and relocation of public art, so all under your purview to decide.
And
whether or
this
not-
commission did the heavy lifting on
Right,
that
on that
project.
design.
When it went to Planning Commission, primarily
Sure.
what they did is reinforce what you what you did by looking at the relationship to the Arlington.
Oh, I don't have the new one, I think.
And
This wasn't on
if that
Google.
was an AUD
Well, it's not there
project,
yet.
it would probably look,
It's not there yet.
I think it would look the same, except there would be more units inside the building. And we spoke with the developer early on. She wanted more units inside the building, and it would have almost looked the
So it
same.
looked like before. You go out there, it's taller.
Yeah. Although, you know what, it might not have had more units, because then, under the AUD guidelines, you have your maximum apartment sizes based on the amount of density. So there may have been a market decision to decide that larger units are going to do better revenue-wise as a rental market.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely, but I'm just saying that one scenario could have been, they couldn't have done that project now. The units are too large. So you have, if you're doing a multi-unit project now, downtown like that, you have to follow the average unit size.
Even for condos?
Yes.
Well, or you'd have to go to Planning Commission and look for a variance.
No.
Oh, you couldn't even do that?
No, not in the new ordinance.
Oh, how interesting.
Okay. I'm going to end with a couple of tall buildings because this is kind of a unique story. That building was Korea Hotel, right? This commission approved that large building there because it was a reconstruction of the previous. It was already there, right? I received more complaints about Ralph's than that building. And I think it was the comfort level knowing that there was a tall building on that corner, and they say, oh, they're rebuilding it. But when Ralph's was building it and they started erecting the wall on Carrillo Street, you don't surprise how many phone calls I got about what the heck was HLC thinking about approving that wall along Carrillo Street.
Good question.
Interesting.
Good question.
But this has a pedestrian scale that Ralph's doesn't have.
Right. And what happened is once the building was built, and basically Ralph said it was the most expensive Ralph's built in the state, complaints stopped. Then when they saw how wonderful the open space was in the corner, how you protected the tree
And the
line.
landscape.
So, you're always going to have a criticism when somebody puts something on paper and says, what are you doing here? And then you start construction and you rethink it again. I just wanted to point that out, that again, tall buildings, some are controversial, some are not. Again, Nordstrom's, how it faces Chapala Street, would we approve that the way it looks now?
No.
It's not that pedestrian friendly all along the back.
No,
But
terrible.
beautiful inside State Street. That could have other examples where we do have tall buildings right at the street, and they
We didn't approve.
that was the ABR one.
Yes. That did not come to That's outside the district.
Okay, you see ABR does it too.
So don't blame us.
The one-
The Burkus
building is that?
one, a half a block up north, I think, did come to this commission, no?
Yeah, because it is in.
Isn't this it?
No, I
This
think
is the one with the brown studios in the back.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this
This
came
did
before the
come.
commission.
The only thing that came before the commission was the archaeology report.
No, I remember
No, it was
reviewing
there.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
It's just a
reviewing
smaller project.
You guys are so funny.
I don't think this is,
No, it is designed by Burkus.
it's not Anacoda, it's
No.
up from,
this. No,
yeah.
not in Dakota.
It's called Via Fontana, I think, something like that.
That's outside the district.
Yeah, I don't think we've reviewed that.
I'm feeling like I missed so much.
But Bill thinks.
I remember it.
Oddly
I'll
enough.
double check. I just might have got that one wrong.
I know we reviewed the archaeology report because they found something of significance.
Yeah. it
Cool.
was,
Old buses.
I have this box of skulls.
Okay, that concludes the presentation. Any questions? If not? Yes?
Oh, there's
Yeah,
public comment requests.
I have to open public comment, so I'll open public comment. I have Mr. DeForest. Mr. DeForest?
Yes, I have some questions, if I may. One is, do you not need to report that this average unit density, has a cap on it as an experimental project? And if you get, and it's only allowed so many units? And if that's reached, then it goes back to the drawing board, so to speak? Is that not true, Betty?
Depends where.
Yes, I don't know, do you want me to answer each question, or do you want to hear all the questions?
Answer each, please.
Oh, okay. Again, we'll go over more details of the program next time, but this 250 units in the high-density zone.
Right.
And we'll show you a map. Much of the El Pueblo Viejo area was specifically excluded from the high-density zone. So the projects you're seeing are really, they're under what's called medium-high. And so they are not part of the 250. What they are is, you were just saying, I just had a question about the Bonds project, Alma de Pueblo. That would not be able to propose it as high, only medium-high, and the unit size requirements apply. But not all projects under the AUD are part of the 250. You'll see, we'll show you a map and where that is, and specifically look at the likelihood of how many high-density projects this commission would see. The areas are more outside of El Pueblo Viejo.
Yeah.
Then Betty, I would like to ask what, just the procedure. Developer comes in, does he come in with a roll of, and he has this piece of property, does he come in with a roll of plans? And what do you do with them? I mean, do you stop him at any point and say this is not going to work, or does it automatically come here?
The staff proposed review process for these projects is still to bring the projects as early as possible at a conceptual stage to this review commission, and then do more intense review and respond to questions and bring it back with that information. Staff does, when we're accepting applications at the counter, review it for basic submittal, but and we sometimes do tell an applicant, no, we're not going to schedule you because XYZ, big question. So it's not really much different than the way we do it now. Yeah.
I mean, we'll typically do a check on the density, to make sure it meets the maximum.
Right. Some projects are put on hold when there are code issues now, even, under the existing ordinances. If they don't have the square footage that they're proposing, or they are over height, or there's some problem. So we do
And we are checking the average unit size to meet those criteria, because those are spelled out. And typically, they all will have to provide us a typical floor plan.
But presuming that the concept meets the code, we'll bring it here for a concept review, yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll close public comment, bring it back to the commission for any additional questions or discussion or comments. Bill?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Loy.
Other than thank you for coming here in this training, and the comprehensive staff review as early in the process is very helpful to our evaluation of our project.
Yes.
For those little bits and pieces of complications that we don't always remember and or understand.
And I think it would be beneficial to everybody if we do happen to identify those in the concept review, that we specifically point it out to staff and say, you please address this. And, oftentimes we don't have that that mindset or those glasses on. So we just need to be a little bit more mindful when we're reviewing a concept project that, hey, this might be an issue. Let's find out.
Would it make sense to have a checklist? I mean, I know it's hard to...
Wow, yeah.
No, because I know projects can be different, but I'm wondering if in this case, for this kind of project, a checklist might be helpful. I don't know.
Pretty intensive checklist, though, I think.
Again, the staff typically does this preliminary plan check.
Okay.
And we would be able to report to you at your initial meeting that, we
This
see
has
that
been
they meet
identified.
these standards, but what we're going to do when we review it after your initial meeting is come back with more detail on the tougher points. And again, Jaime has apologized, and I want to apologize again that, this kind of rolled out without the necessary support that you really need. And I don't know if any of you saw the ABR meeting on a larger project in Outer State Street, but we had a much more successful start with them on a larger project out there a week or so ago, where the staff was assigned as a case planner. They had talked to the applicant ahead of time. They are going to do what we call PRT, project review team. And so we're going to need to work harder as well.
We also had,
with
we
you.
had a memorandum outlining consistency with guidelines, so the
Yep,
highlighting
out-of-state street guidelines.
the board's, what they should focus on. So, we're trying to do a better job on having some staff input.
So the only one that's not working harder is the planning commission.
Well, and, this program is really important to the Planning Commission. They did a lot to shape it.
Yeah.
And I think having the Planning Commission review on some of these projects is really needed. The question is when, which projects, when, and how. And that's what we propose to talk with you a little bit more about next time is how do we constructively add the Planning Commission input. They've invested a lot and they want to see success in this program. And these are potentially big and controversial projects. And I think they're a good sounding board for hearing community concerns. And we think their review can be value added, is value added.
I also wanted to mention.
I wish we had this meeting prior to reviewing Arlington Village.
Right.
Yeah.
That's, would have made all the difference.
Yeah.
But that was not an AUD project.
But it looks a lot like an AUD.
No, but it was always threatened that they were,
Going.
it would conform.
Right.
And conform, and one parking space, all this stuff.
Right.
If we had, not that we could do anything about the parking, but I think the outcome would have been a better project if we had been tougher.
I also wanted to comment to Commissioner's question, Mr. Winnick, about checklists, because I think, at least I've been authorized to at least come up with a work program to develop some multi-unit design guidelines, which some communities have, which might speak a little bit to the issue of how livable are these units, which is a concern when you start getting density and trying to get people to feel comfortable in these locations. So I think we'll look at that, see maybe that'll help focus our concerns initially on concept level.
Thanks. And actually, I said checklist, but I have to say, as I reflected on it after saying it and then hearing Ms. Wace's response, I still prefer the idea of a staff recommendation anyway, which is in line with what you're saying. So that's great. I mean, if we get staff support, I think that would be really fabulous. So thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lamont. Thank you, Ms. Weiss.
Thank you
We
very
will
much.
get the material to you in advance for your next meeting
Okay.
with a table that compares the
Yeah.
ordinance to the
And
prior
that map.
ordinance and the maps of where the density
Yeah.
zones are. And then we'll, just again, thinking ahead, what we're going to talk about primarily is how do you think it would work to involve the Planning Commission?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Meeting adjourned.